Hi, welcome to my art studio. Come on in. My studio begins before the studio with this little entryway. I have a little bookshelf right here where I have several different art books. And then behind the door, I have some CDs and yoga things and a calendar. This whole entry section was created because somebody at some point in time put a bathroom in here. This used to be a bathtub, but we needed to create stairs to the attic. And so we took the bathtub out, and in its place, we put this little pocket door with this little secret stairwell to the attic. I basically keep my backpacks for painting outside, some jars for painting, and on these shelves, I have art that I sell, my little postcards of my ink drawings, and those will be on my website at some point. I have a few different portfolios with art, my favorite pochade box for oil painting, and then more art that I sell in the drawers and mailing supplies. And then the bottom two drawers are just storage of some of my old drawings. Before we had that, my studio was really crowded, still pretty crowded, but I'll take you in there next. It's just a nice extra chair, and it holds my shawl for when I get too cold, and a few artworks that my daughter did during GCSE art. This little rabbit holds the door open because the door doesn't work very well. And so when I close it, he can hold the door closed for me. And then this is the door to the main studio. I've got lots of different stations in my studio. So I have a storage area over on the side when you first walk in, and then over facing the window is my main work area. And then over against the other wall are some IKEA units that I inherited from my daughter. And over in this section, when it's too sunny in the window, I will often create art over here. It's also the area that I use for mailing out art. And this is basically my main storage area. I have a lot more art books over here. I don't even have all of my art books in the studio, but I have 3 different sections where I keep them in here. They get moved around a lot, and I do look at them a lot. So this is sort of my things that people I love have given me section, as well as my bookshelves, and a place where I keep all of the paperworky things that I'm working on. So I've got little shells and crystals and rocks and things from people. A former student made this. My friend Sunny brought me this from China when she went recently. This is a little figurine from Greece when I did a study abroad there many moons ago. And one of the shopkeepers gave that to me. Some different pigments, and it's all sorts of little special things like that that have good memories for me. There's my parents when my mother was younger than I am now. Some incense, matches, candles, etc. And over here, I keep my washi tape and ink, and there's more on the bottom. Over here, I keep all sorts of different art things. Do you want to see inside of them? Okay. So here we go. In this first drawer, it's just a little junk drawer. Paper clips, staplers, tape, things like that. And in the one next to that is another kind of a junk drawer. Lots of little tags and little pieces of paper, glue tack. And then this one is the worst of all of the junk drawers. It's got everything from a hammer to some Healing with the Angels oracle cards. You don't really want to see them here. It's a little embarrassing. And then down below, more of the art stuff that I use. So this one is lots of watercolor things. I've got pipettes, little empty pans, some student watercolor stuff down in the bottom. I do have a niece who really loves art, and I just like to have it for when people come over. And next to that, my Winsor & Newton oil paints, all of my Rembrandt Cobra oil paints. Down here are acrylic paints, which I rarely use, but I do use them sometimes for gessoing panels or doing an underpainting. So it's nice to have those. I also have some printer's ink for printing and a brayer. So that lives there. And then next to that, an assortment of different oil painting mediums. And this is way more than I need. But when I left my job at the university, they had closed the art department and I had a lot of leftover stuff. So that's here. This drawer has more oil paints. Daniel Smith paints, as well as some Jackson's oil paints. All of my oil paints are water mixable oils because that's all I use. Coming back over to this end, kind of a junk drawer of art stuff, Posca pens, and some things for making rivets, and some more printmaking and bookmaking stuff, some book boards, this little box that holds lots of brayers and printmaking tools. So this is sort of the printmaking section that I use the most, and the one in the big drawer is overflow. More shish kebab skewers. And this is lots of little storage containers that I use. Again, a lot of these are things that were left over from when I taught, and I'm not going to throw them away because even though it'll probably take me a lifetime to use it all, I will use it all. So I've got little bottles for mediums, little things for filling aqua brushes or other things. And then I also keep, like when I use a contact lens thing and it gets empty, I'll put it in here, or an empty jar that's pretty, that might be useful for something. It's a bit of a hoarder's drawer, but all of that kind of stuff lives here. Then on the bottom, I have some just really cheap craft paint and some more Posca pens. This is my main little printmaking drawer where I have lots of stamp pads, and it's a bit of a Rubik's Cube, but down at the bottom I have lots of little prints that I've made. Next to that, I don't know, it's a catch-all. I've got more empty jars and things that I'll use mostly for oil painting, empty pill bottles, because they don't give you these in England. So these are kind of gold dust here. Got some staples for making canvases, some brush cleaner. I know online I mostly do watercolor and drawing and ink, but I have a big history of doing oil paint. So you're going to be seeing a lot of oil painting things in my studio. Over on the top, I have this little radio and CD player so that I can listen to music, and then a little turntable so I can listen to albums. In here are all of the CDs that I've illustrated. So I just keep those here and I listen to them. In this section, I have some ancient filing cabinets that I bought in Tucson when I was in my mid-20s. And they've traveled with me to every state and every country and every house I've ever lived in. Above that, I've just taken some bricks and created a little paper storage area. So I have boxes of drawing paper behind there, some more paper tucked in here. On the top, some yarn and sewing things, and some business receipts and little letters from people that I love. And then I have my lovely Peg and All pochade box, which I'm so excited to use now that it's summer. I have been an artist my whole life as well as a teacher. And so I've accumulated a lot of stuff and I've done a lot of different media. So I have more than probably the average person might have. And I have pared things down as well. I'm a little bit of a hoarder, but kind of an organized hoarder who regularly purges things. Let me show you what's in these drawers very quickly. And I used to keep all of my painting supplies in here and all of my drawing supplies in here, but you'll see very soon that I keep those in other areas of my studio right now. And these two basically just hold different items that I use, again, for painting and drawing outside. This one has an assortment of different pencil bags and tools and hats and scarves. And I do have some student drawing supplies in the back so that if I ever have any nieces or nephews over, I can just pull out some fun supplies and let them go crazy. And listen to the squeak. It's an antique, folks. And then this one holds just different boxes of things that I still need to open and an assortment of different plein air things, all sorts of things from clips and single dippers for holding water and medium. And again, gloves and little tiny canvases that I can use for oil painting, wet wipes, tissues, and my little red glasses that I use for plein air painting. Basically, if I'm going to plein air paint, this is where I come shopping for things to put in my kit. And then underneath, some more athletic wristbands, a wet panel carrier for oil painting. It's just a hodgepodge of different things. I know what's in here, and I do use this drawer a lot. This one holds a lot of my printmaking stuff, an assortment of brayers and inks, linoleum cutters, shish kebab skewers. this little ceiling wax kit that I want to play around with. And then other things here for printmaking. It's basically just a printmaking drawer. This drawer is not really related to art. Well, not visual art anyway. And here I have just a lot of different things that I've written over the years and lots of tapes of music that I've written and ways to listen to it. I've always been an artist who does multiple things. I love creative writing and I studied that at university and in graduate school as well as art. This basically just holds a lot of old stories that I've written. And I used to write songs. I don't write them so much anymore. I leave that to my husband. But I have lots of tapes of music that I've written over the years. This is my ceramics drawer. I've purged a lot of my ceramics over the years, but I have some stuff in here, mostly just Fimo and stuff like that. I got rid of all of the fine art ceramic stuff, but I still have some of my ceramics tools and a few things, just little odds and ends that I've saved over the years. Like in here, little Fimo things that I made. I was really into this for like a year or two, and I should let it all go, but again, it's a fun craft to do when nieces and nephews come over and maybe someday grandkids. Here are all of my files from when I taught at university. This one's super, super heavy. And I actually just went through and organized these pretty recently. And although I'm not teaching at university anymore, I do still teach sometimes workshops and I teach online, obviously. So these files really come in handy. This one's really heavy, so I usually use a foot to close it. This is the main room and it looks a lot bigger on camera than it really is. It's not that big. And when we first bought the house, we thought we'd only live here for a year or two. It had previously been a little girl's bedroom, so that's why the walls are pink and the carpet's white. And those are things that I would definitely, if I could go back in time, change. But as you can see, I have so much stuff in here that that would be such a huge project, and it's not anything that's on my agenda in the near future. So this is the section where I create most of my art. And I normally use this desk in front of the window, but if it's too sunny, oftentimes I'll move over on the side. And it's nice to have this L configuration so that I can put lots of the stuff that you use when you're creating art over on the side and then have a nice open workspace. This is the main desk where I create. And it used to be an old dressing table and the wood was really suffering from the sun. So I've just put an IKEA topper on top of it, which works great because I can do anything on here and wipe it off. And if it gets ruined, I can just replace it for 20 quid. So it's no big deal. And this is the main desk where I like to work because look at my view. That view is the reason why I work in an upstairs bedroom and not some downstairs room that's really dark and uninspiring. That view brings me so much joy all the time. This is just a little table over on this side. It does have a drawer that I blocked off, and I do keep postcards and things in there. So if I want to access that drawer, I just move this out of the way. And on top of that is just a stray board that can move around, and it does move around a lot. And this is just a board that I used to have on top of a loom. I used to have a big floor loom when we lived in America, and I figured out a way to put this on top of it and use it as a workstation when I wasn't weaving, which was always. And I don't know why, but I brought it overseas and it works really well here because it extends the reach of the table so that I can have the little generic IKEA drawer unit underneath, which is so useful. And then this is not holding anything up, but I just store it there. And this comes in handy a lot of times if I'm going to be teaching online or if I'm doing a Zoom call or something like that, I can put my laptop up here and it just raises it up a little bit. And then I've got some little Boots cucumber wipes, which I use all the time for everything. So that just lives under there. There we go. Oh, there is one other thing. Underneath this desk on this side, I have another pochade box. And this one's for oils, but I can kit it out to use for watercolors as well if I'm doing something a little bit larger. And she lives right under the desk on top of the IKEA stand. In the dressing table, I have two drawers that hold basically the stuff that I use when I'm drawing. and you'll see me go in these a lot. Forgive the mess. Again, I know where everything is, but basically in here I've got some watercolor palettes, a ruler. And again, these are not the watercolor palettes that I use for traveling. These are studio ones, although this is a travel one. I'm lying. There are some travel ones here, but I don't really use them. If you want a separate video about that and why, we can do that. But I keep some pencils and pens and masking fluid and heated erasers, rubber cement pickup. All of that stuff lives in this drawer. So this is the watercolor drawer. And then this is the drawing drawer. I basically have pens and pencils and ink things, erasers, some little viewfinders, some scrap paper. I've got my little ball for when I get stressed. I like to just toss this around. He lives there. Some washi tape. And then these are my different bone folders for folding paper. Underneath the desk, I keep an assortment of bags for trash, as well as paper towels and shop cloths for painting. And then over on this side, I keep my hair dryer for watercolor, and I have a little waste bin over there. This little section over here just holds things that I use a lot. Sage, I've got some crystals and some watercolor brushes and things that I use if I'm just want to grab something really quickly. I've got some rocks and shells and sea glass in here. This is where I keep little cards for when I'm mailing art. I can write on there. I've got some business cards in there and other people's business cards in the bottom. Got a little bowl of crystals, my iris circle maker, and a little inkwell for drawing. I've got my toothpicks, my cotton buds, and I've got more cotton buds up here. And a candle. Over on this side of the desk, I have a little ceramic jar that holds Poppy's biscuits, and this keeps her happy, especially if she's starting to grow impatient while I'm filming. So those live here. Some candles, and then just a little power bank there. This holds my phone or my iPad or whatever I'm using. And this is what I use for filming. A lot of people ask. I keep this rock on top of it because sometimes it can get tippy if I put it too high or move it too far over. But I put my phone on the top and I can adjust this up or down. It has a light underneath, but I find that the light isn't enough, so I use other lights as well. And then I film here on this desk. And the nice thing about this is it has a USB port, so I can just pick it up and move it to the other desk if I'm going to be filming over there. This little drawer unit from IKEA holds a lot of stuff, and for a long time this was the only one I had in here. The top drawer holds all of the oil paints that I use most often. And if I run out of a color, I'll go over to the other storage area and replenish it. And when I am doing oil painting, I'll set up my plein air easel right over here. And then I have this handy in case I need anything. And this next two drawers are charcoal supplies. This drawer holds a lot of my knit trim. And then when I taught drawing at university, I used to have my students buy this set. I think it's a really nice one because it holds kind of everything that you need for charcoal. So these are two modified ones of those. And then this is just another travel set. If I'm going to draw downstairs or in another area of the house, I can bring this and it has everything that I want. And then the next drawer down holds even more charcoal stuff. Willow charcoal, vine charcoal, sanguine, all of the tools and supplies you need for charcoal drawing. Top drawer oil painting, next two drawers charcoal, and then the drawer below that is for mailing. And I have thought about moving this up closer, but I honestly don't mail things that often, and it's really no trouble. It gives me my exercise to have to bend down. And then in the very bottom drawer, I've got some more supplies for oil painting plein air, including this sweet little box that a friend of mine made that I can put on a tripod. And open it up and I have a palette. And I've got my travel brushes here, wet panel carriers. Basically, this is an oil painting drawer. This desk used to be my watercolor desk, and then I realized I never sat there to do watercolor, but it has a really low profile, so it works well there as a storage area. So when I open it up, I have this little area here, and I have all of my different sketch inks and watercolor pencils, or Inktense pencils. Anything to do with Inktense or graphitin or ink drawing pretty much goes here, as well as my watercolor mediums, masking fluid, gum arabic, things like that. And in this little jar, I keep all of my Winsor & Newton watercolor paints. And then up above it, these are the ones that are more for a limited palette, my Winsor & Newton, which I used exclusively for many years. It's really only in the last few years that I've started exploring different watercolor manufacturers. So that's why I have a lot of that. And then in here are some gouache paints, just the main ones for a limited palette. And this little tin holds a bunch of student watercolors that I found in my mother's basement that she didn't want anymore. And I've used these in the past, but I also use them for when I'm making palettes for friends who don't really do art but want to try it. This drawer is another sort of an art junk drawer. I've got some screwdrivers, some art tools, some Inktense blocks, and I keep my extra watercolor pans for Winsor & Newton in these tins and in here as well. Tape measure comes in handy all the time, and then some masking fluid and just different things for picture hanging. And underneath here is an assortment of lots of different things. So I've got some of my pastels, some canvases for painting, a couple pochade boxes over here, and some sketchbooks. I keep my M-gram watercolors in here. And then down here are my paints for when I go oil painting plein air. This is my little travel box that I chuck in my backpack. And here's Poppy's bed, where she puts in a lot of hours working very hard. And this one is newer, and I find it so useful. I used to have it over on the other side facing the other way, and it was really cumbersome to get to because I used to have this table come out all of the way to here, and then this was inside. I love it here. I thought I would hate it because it's so higgledy-piggledy mismatched, but it's so absolutely convenient that I love it. So in the first drawer, I have all of my palettes for traveling. Those all live here, and it makes it really easy to see what I've got. I also keep some of my larger watercolor palettes in the watercolor trolley, but I like to keep them separate because these are different. These are the ones that I take more for when I'm traveling, whereas the other ones are more for in the studio. And the next drawer down is more travel watercolor stuff. So these are little travel easels that I have for watercolor, and cups and things for that, and a couple of extra Go Draw palettes and some gouache. And then I also keep all of my Daniel Smith watercolors in here because these are the ones that I use most for travel art. And then I also have some in here. And I have considered the fact that I have my Winsor & Newton and M-gram over on that other desk and my Daniel Smith here. And I've thought about putting it all together, but honestly, it works for me this way. I know where everything is and I can easily find it. And the next drawer down is my drawing drawer. So this is for all of my regular drawing with graphite or ink. I've got lots of different pencils, some graphite blocks, and also my dip pens, fountain pens, Kohinoor, and some more in here. Basically, this is the drawing drawer. And below that is a drawer that I use. It just has lots of different cards that I can mail things with. I've got my watercolor postcards that live here. And then watercolors that I'm not using right now, like my Rosa Gallery and my White Nights. And then in the very, very bottom, it's a bit of correspondence and mailing things and some old pencil case bags that I've made. And this used to be my pencil case for years and years and years. I would travel with this. It was great. I could hold drawing stuff on one side, ink stuff on the other, and I would put my watercolor palette in here, and it served me really well. So I keep it for sentimental reasons. I almost forgot to talk about my chair. I use this ergonomic chair because I have lots of back problems and chronic pain problems, and this saves me. I can sit in this and I don't hurt as much as I would if I sat in a conventional chair. This is my main light. I have a love-hate relationship with it. It's not great, and I need to use lots of other lights along with it. So I normally try to film just in the window when the sunlight is perfect, when it's not too sunny, but it's not too dark. And it's a nice supplement when I'm doing that. And the nice thing about this, however, is that I can move it. So I can move it over here if I want to paint at the other desk. And I can also get into here and to all of this storage. And I'm going to spare you a major in-depth tour of this area because we don't have all day and it's kind of stressful. And these were all pink because my daughter's bedroom was pink like this one when we first moved to England. I didn't really want them to be pink, so I just put this contact paper over them, which I know isn't fooling anyone, but I like the look of it. And then in here is a big mess. Different solvents, tapes, extra Q-tips, and things that I use for oil painting. I've got lots of sprays in there for spraying artwork and sealing it. I've got a little paper cutter that lives up here, and I use this a lot. That's enough of that one. And this shelf is all of my electronic stuff for filming. I've got cameras, I've got microphones, I've got extra cables for when I'm teaching online or whatever. So this is all that stuff lives on this shelf. And then this shelf is a bowl that I made that I love. This was the first bowl that I ever made that wasn't terrible, although it's not great. 1997. It's probably older than some people watching this. And then behind here is a basket filled with lots of different notebooks. And then this shelf, again, is just a hodgepodge of the kinds of things that artists collect over time. I have these that I got at a charity shop, and these are also great for wet panels. If you're oil painting, you can put 6 little paintings on here and set them aside to dry. In this box, I keep all of the originals of my ink drawings that I've created during like Inktober and stuff like that. The originals live in here. And the reason is because I make copies of them to send to people or for watercolor postcards. And the copies look a lot like the originals. So this way I know the originals are safe and they live over here. But behind there, it's just a lot of weaving stuff and sewing things. And so we don't really need to see that. I have this extra lamp here, and this gets moved around a lot. So under here are things like gesso and varnish and glue and extra brushes for doing the utilitarian side of being an artist, as well as some weaving things that I still have hung on to. You can put her back. I also have a few tripods that I store back here for oil painting. This is my life, basically. I don't go in here too often. It's a lot of stuff, again, that I used to really do a lot of, and I don't so much anymore. I do occasionally still do jewelry making and knitting and crocheting, but not that often, and this is where those items live. So in here are just some boxes. This is from the 70s or the 60s. I don't know, my era. But this one is all of my pastels from that era of my life. This is like letters, song lyrics, stuff like that. And down here, I have jewelry making stuff here and the one next to it. And we're not going to get into it, but this is where it lives. Here I have an assortment of things. I've got some palettes that I use most frequently, folders of my art. Basically, this is just art and palettes and my gouache. All my gouache and my gouache palettes live in here. I've got my selection of gouache, which I will be using soon. And these are all different palette inserts for my oil painting pochade boxes underneath. This is the main cart that I use when I'm watercolor or oil painting. It's the ones that hold all of the things that are being in use the most, whereas a lot of the stuff in the drawers are just extra stuff. So I've done little tours of this before, but this side is all for watercolor and ink. And then when I want to do oil painting, I just turn it around, and all of my brushes and main supplies for oil painting is on this side. This is the top of my desk, which, if you remember, I said was a dressing table, and the mirror was missing, which is why it's not a dressing table anymore, but it just worked really well here, and it gave me a few extra drawers for storing things. So in here, I keep things like extra ink pens and kneaded erasers and little spray bottles. And in this drawer, I keep just some of the Muji pens that I use for my bullet journaling, some extra spray bottles, and again, lots of these little single dippers and twin dippers that you use for oil painting, and some ink. I don't know what's in this basket, and I don't want to look, but I think it's just a flower press and some decorative things. So I've got some sponges and cotton balls and cotton buds and more sponges that I use for painting. My daughter made this bowl and I use this a lot. And she also made these little bowls, and I use these a lot to hold things when I'm going to be painting. So I've got lots of little ceramics that my daughter made or that I made. And then over here, this holds, again, some extra pens and pencils. And the drawers come all the way out. So I can go put it down on the table and I can look and see what's in here. And this is, again, a little oil painting section. This was my first big pochade box for oil painting. It's one of the Guerrilla painters, and it's a beast. So I would never take this out painting because I have too much back pain and it would kill me, but I did and do still use it in the studio because it's great as a desktop easel and it holds everything. So if I want to go downstairs and paint, I can just bring this and I can sit and paint downstairs or paint out in the garden, and it's really easy. And then I've just got lots of different panels in various states of being gessoed for painting. I've got a selection of some of my favorite reference books that I use the most frequently. This is me and my honey when we were a lot younger. And then over here are some extra ink pens and things like the Pentel Milky brushes. Those all live over here with some extra water brushes. And then over here are my Tombos, which I use all the time for bullet journaling, and also some extra brushes that are not my favorite brushes, but it's always nice to have some extras. And again, if I'm teaching or having somebody over who doesn't really do art a lot, they have brushes that they can use. My son made this when he was 5, and this is his little handprint, and he put a guitar pick there because I was playing the guitar a lot at that time. He also decorated this little rock for me. It's got a little hole here because he was going to teach me how to start campfires using just a stick and tinder, and I still hope he shows me how to do that someday. And finally, there is this corner which holds lots of different things. I got this at a charity shop. It's a plate rack from a kitchen, and it makes a great wet panel holder. And then this is from IKEA, and it also makes a great wet panel holder. Then I have this easel, which I really don't use a lot lately. I've been working smaller lately. When I'm oil painting, even if I'm oil painting something really large, I generally like to use one of my plein air setups, and I move it over by the desk and the cart over there so I've got the light from the window. And so I do oil paint in here, but not usually on this. This will be something more that I'll use if I'm going to do a really large drawing. I'll put it on a board and put it on here. So she just scoots on over when I need to get over here, which isn't really very often. This used to hold piano rolls. We had an old player piano when I was growing up, and I inherited it from my mother. So inside of here are just an assortment of different sketchbooks, felt and photographs, and things that I use for maybe stretching watercolor paper. And I also have a stack of these IBM cards from my father because he was a professor of computer science in the 70s and 80s. And these were for programming things. If you know, you know, back in the day when the computer used to be the size of an entire room. And so these were the IBM cards from his college. We used to write notes on these when I was a kid. So they remind me of him. He's been gone a long time now. So this is just a little piece of my childhood that brings me joy. And then over on the side are just some different canvases for oil painting and some panels that are gessoed for oil painting, as well as some old oil paintings that I've done. They all just get kind of stored along here. This box just holds old letters, some more panels for oil painting. I was going to make this box into a pochade box, again, back in the day before people could buy them that were already made, and I never did. I don't know why I keep it. Every time I think I'm going to get rid of it, I open it up and look at it and think, this would be a really nice paint box. So I still have it. And then here's my little plaque from you all watching and subscribing. So thank you very much. This was my father's. This was amongst his things from his office. And I love to use it for little postcard paintings. I just keep it here and I change the art out a lot. And then I got this little tiny version in London, which I also like to use. There's lots of different drawing supplies in here. This is something that if I'm going to teach, I can just take that box with me. And then up here is my Daler Rowney Art Sphere easel, and I really like to use that for if I'm going to do watercolor that's a little bit larger. So I'll put that over on my desk and I can just change the angle on it, and it makes it a little bit higher so there's less stress on your neck. Over here is all of my paper that I use on a regular basis for watercolor and drawing. And then underneath is all of my sewing and crocheting and knitting supplies. And that all lives down here. This is the desk that I use when it's too bright over by the window, and it's also the desk that I use when I'm mailing out art. Over here, I've got just a little paper cutter that I use for cutting my watercolor postcards down to size. Then I've got my travel art kit, my Peg and All Sendak, so that it's always nice and handy because I end up using this a lot in the studio as well. In this drawer, I keep my iPad and other little things that I'll put in the Sendak. I like to switch it up and put different things in there from time to time. And then this is for notes and my little watercolor swatches. And the nice thing about this is that it's a standing desk, so I can raise it if I want to work standing up, which I do a lot of the time. So this saves my back. Or if I want to sit, I can bring my chair over here or the chair from the little vestibule when you walk in, and I can sit here as well. Or if I have somebody in here who wants to paint and work at the same time, they can sit here. That's never happened, but never say never. And then this is my Victorian travel desk. I love her so much, and I do use it a lot, especially if I'm just going to be writing. And the way it works is you just open it up, and then you have a lovely desk. And it also holds lots of cool things. So on the bottom here, I keep lots of my different little watercolors. They just live here. And then in the top section, I have some little journals, my traveler's notebook. And then in the top, I keep a kneaded eraser over on the left. And this is a little inkwell that came with the desk. I don't know if I'll ever use this for ink, but that's what it was for initially. And then there's a little secret compartment underneath here where I store some pens and things for drawing. And there is actually a secret compartment. You just look at this and it pops up. And then there are a few little secret drawers in there. And I don't really keep anything in there, but I should keep secrets in there. So that's kind of fun. Over here are a few of my first watercolors and a woodcut that I made. And I like to keep this here because it's my hand and I like to just put it there when I'm leaving the room. And so that's my studio. We've made it to the end. I wanted to give you a little glimpse of everything I have, but not bore you to tears. I haven't always had a dedicated studio. I've had lots of studios in my life. I've had them in basements. I've had them just in corner of rooms. Up until moving to England, I either did art at the university where I would always have an office and a storage room to hold a lot of my stuff. And even if I did have a studio at home, I really didn't use it much because I had younger children. So my studio would basically just be a storage closet. And I would bring my art downstairs and I would do my art in the living room where the kids were around. But since moving to England, I love this studio so much. I don't care that it's small. I like that it's small. I like that I have a beautiful view. You don't need any space to create art. You can create art outside. You can create art anywhere you want. This is just the studio where I like to create. Thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate your support. I hope you've enjoyed this tour. I hope you have a beautiful day with many painting and drawing adventures of your own.